Hello and welcome to the Hope Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Schmalhofer, and this is episode number 35. So thank you so much for joining me on the Hope Recovery Podcast. Please note that this full video episode today is called Step 2 of Recovery, a Power Greater Than Ourselves, and it is based on the original audio podcast, episode number 35. This episode today is a podcast on Step 2 of Recovery. And in this episode, I attempt to present the main principles that are included in this step. Step 2 of Recovery, as given by Narcotics Anonymous, states we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. As many of you know, I have already done an episode on Step 1 of Recovery, which is called Step 1 of Recovery. We admitted we were powerless. And also I did sort of an introduction to the 12 steps, and that episode is called The 12 Steps of Recovery, a Spiritual Foundation. The steps of recovery are intended to be done in sequence, and so if you have not watched or listened to the previous episodes, I encourage you to go back and watch the other episodes before starting this one. I do love the 12 steps of recovery, and I'll be doing an episode on each of the 12 steps of recovery over the next weeks and months until they are all covered. There is much that can be said for each step of recovery, and many books and lessons have been written for the 12 steps of recovery. But for me, in these podcast episodes, I will try to present the main principles of each step so you can apply them to your own recovery and your own life circumstance. Also, I certainly encourage you to read the books of AA and NA for their guidance regarding each of the 12 steps of recovery, as they are the main founders of the 12 steps of recovery. As with each of the 12 steps of recovery, I will try to provide a biblical perspective to each step, and will try to bring out the spiritual principles that are key to each of the 12 steps. Also, I will include a Bible passage that I feel relates well to that particular step. As a reminder, as you read through the 12 steps of recovery, they mention God or refer to God many times. And so the 12 steps of recovery are very much about God and about having a spiritual experience with God. And so I will attempt to bring out the spiritual principles of each step. The title of the episode today then is simply Step 2 of Recovery, a Power Greater Than Ourselves. Step 2 of Recovery, as given by Narcotics Anonymous, states, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 2 is all about power, but specifically about a power greater than ourselves. And this Step 2 follows on from Step 1, which also talks about power. But in Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over our addiction. As you recall, Step 1 states, we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. So briefly, in Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over our addiction. And this is indeed a tremendous admission, to acknowledge that we are powerless over our addiction. And for anyone in addiction, this is a great truth to acknowledge and to embrace as being true for you, that you are powerless over your addiction. But Step 2 does not leave you there as being powerless. Step 2 talks about a power greater than ourselves. Because in our own power and in our own strength, we did not have the power to overcome our addiction. The AA book on page 45 from the chapter We Agnostics talks about this idea of power of both Step 1 and Step 2 when it states this. It says, our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how are we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is all about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. End quote. There is much to be taken from step 2, but in my view, there are 3 main principles. And in many ways, step 2 takes many important steps of beginning. And also in many ways, step 2 is the beginning of hope as well. The first main principle of step 2 is, number 1, the beginning of faith, or we came to believe. In many ways, step 2 is the beginning of faith. It is yet a very small expression of faith, but in some small way, step 2 begins the process of believing. It is not important to clearly understand who this higher power is just yet, but it is important to have faith, to believe that there is somewhere, somehow, a power greater than ourselves. Through the 12 steps of recovery, many millions of people over many decades of time have been successful in recovery. And so even if you simply start with the faith, with believing that all of these millions of people that have been successful in recovery are the evidence that there is indeed a power greater than yourself, that is a fine place to start. To believe that there must be a power greater than yourself, and that is where you start. You believe in the power that worked for so many others to be successful in their recovery, and that same power can work for you as well. The second main principle of step 2 is, number 2, the beginning of accepting a higher power, a power greater than ourselves. Step 2 is also the beginning of accepting help from a higher power. You are not there just yet, but you are now convinced you need help beyond yourself. You are thoroughly convinced that you do not have the necessary power yourself to be successful in recovery. If you did, you would have been clean and sober a long time ago. But you do believe there is a power greater than yourself that can help you in your recovery. It is okay that right now you are not entirely clear on exactly what this higher power is or what this higher power looks like, but you know that it is only with a higher power, a power greater than yourself, that you can be successful in recovery. And so you do indeed believe that with a power greater than yourself, you can be successful in recovery. And so you continue on. The third main principle of step 2 is, number 3, the beginning of a return to sanity, as in could restore us to sanity. Step 1 says that your life had become unmanageable, which is another way of saying your life was in chaos. Your life was falling apart. But it is with step 2 that gives you the hope that this higher power could restore you to sanity, that this higher power could restore your life to sanity. It likely would not be overnight, but this higher power would give you the power to begin to bring sanity into your life. It won't be fast, and it will likely be painful, but with this power greater than yourself, it is possible. Recovery is now possible. Putting these 3 principles together, for step 2, it does indicate that step 2 is very much about hope. 1, the beginning of faith we came to believe. And 2, the beginning of accepting a higher power, a power greater than ourselves. And 3, the beginning of a return to sanity, as in could restore us to sanity. This leads me to the Bible passage for step 2 from Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, that says, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Your recovery might seem absolutely impossible to you right now. You may have tried recovery or rehab many, many times, and yet you were still not able to be successful in recovery. But this Bible verse from Philippians 4:13 seems to speak to this very topic, saying, I can do all things, even recover from years of alcohol or drug addiction, through him who strengthens me. Consider this passage as you go further in step 2, and even later as you look at the rest of the 12 steps of recovery. And remember the passage, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Recovery is absolutely possible with a power greater than yourself, with the true higher power. It is with this coming to believe in a power greater than yourself that your life could be restored to sanity. That is indeed hope. Not hope in yourself or even in any other person, but hope in a higher power, in a power greater than yourself. That is how you can have true hope, when you put your hope in God, the true higher power. The wording of step 2 is very much an expression of hope. Step 2 of recovery says, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. That is hope. And it is the beginning of faith as well. I encourage you to embrace this idea of faith. And wherever you are at in your faith and with your belief in a higher power and with God, I encourage you to continue to seek to find God. And I believe if you genuinely seek to find God, you will indeed find him. And you will find that this true higher power does indeed have the power to restore your life to sanity and the power to help you be successful in recovery and even to a brand new life as well. That is what I have for you today. Thank you for joining me on the Hope Recovery Podcast. And remember, there is always hope with God. Take care, and God bless you all. That concludes the podcast episode for today. But if I may, let me remind you, if you are interested in more faith-based recovery resources, please see the website at www.HopeRecoveryUs. And if there is any way I can help you or your recovery group or recovery ministry or church, please feel free to email me at HopeRecoveryUs@gmail.com. And I would be happy to talk with you further. And again, take care and God bless you all.